The American middle class is a social class in the United States. While the concept is typically ambiguous in popular opinion and common language use, contemporary social scientists have put forward several more or less congruent theories on the American middle class. Depending on the class model used, the middle class constitutes anywhere from 25% to 66% of households. One of the first major studies of the middle class in America was White Collar: The American Middle Classes, published in 1951 by sociologist C. Wright Mills. Later sociologists such as Dennis Gilbert of Hamilton College commonly divide the middle class into two subgroups, constituting roughly 15% to 20% of households is the upper professional middle class, consisting of highly educated, salaried professionals and managers. Constituting roughly one-third of households is the lower middle class, consisting mostly of semi-professionals, skilled craftsmen and lower-level management. Middle-class persons commonly have a comfortable standard of living, significant economic security, considerable work autonomy, and rely on their expertise to sustain themselves. Members of the middle class belong to diverse groups which overlap with each other. Overall, middle-class persons, especially upper-middle-class individuals, are characterized by conceptualizing, creating and consulting. Thus, college education is one of the main indicators of middle-class status, largely attributed to the nature of middle-class occupations. Middle-class values tend to emphasize independence, adherence to intrinsic standards, the valuing innovation and respecting non-conformity. Politically more active than other demographics, college-educated middle-class professionals are split between the two major parties. Income varies considerably from near the national median to well in excess of $100,000. Household income figures, however, do not always reflect class status and standard of living, as they are largely influenced by the number of income earners and fail to recognize household size. It is therefore possible for a large, dual-earner, lower-middle-class household to out-earn a small, one-earner, upper-middle-class household. The middle classes are very influential, as they encompass the majority of voters, writers, teachers, journalists, and editors. Most societal trends in the U.S. originate within the middle classes. History scholars have a variety of technical measures of who is middle class. By contrast, public opinion has a variety of implicit measures. The definitions seem to stretch quite a great deal depending on the political cause that is being invoked or defended. As one commentator noted, "Well, it depends on whom you ask. Everyone wants to believe they are middle class. For people on the bottom and the top of the wage scale, a phrase connotes a certain regular Joe cachet. But this eagerness to be part of the group has led the definition to be stretched like a bungee cord, used to defend, attack, describe everything, from the earned income tax credit to the estate tax. Subdivisions. The middle class by one definition consists of an upper middle class, made up of professionals distinguished by exceptionally high educational attainment as well as high economic security, and a lower middle class, consisting of semi-professionals. While the groups overlap, differences between those at the center of both groups are considerable. The lower middle class has lower educational attainment, considerably less workplace autonomy, and lower incomes than the upper middle class. With the emergence of a two-tier labor market, the economic benefits and life chances of upper middle class professionals have grown considerably compared to those of the lower middle class. The lower middle class needs two income earners in order to sustain a comfortable standard of living, while many upper middle class households can maintain a similar standard of living with just one income earner. The professional, managerial middle class, the professional class, also called the upper upper middle class consists mostly of highly educated white-collar salaried professionals whose work is largely self-directed. In 2005, these household incomes commonly exceed $100,000. Class members typically hold graduate degrees, with educational attainment serving as the main distinguishing feature of this class. These professionals typically conceptualize, create, consult, and supervise. As a result, upper-middle-class employees enjoy great autonomy in the workplace and are more satisfied with the careers than non-professional middle-class individuals. In terms of financial wealth income, the professional middle class fits in the top third, but seldom reach the top 5% of American society. According to sociologists such as Dennis Gilbert, James Hensland, Joseph Hickey, and William Thompson, the upper middle class constitutes 15% of the population. The upper middle class has grown, and its composition has changed. Increasingly salaried managers and professionals have replaced individual business owners and independent professionals. The key to the success of the upper middle class is the growing importance of educational certification. Its lifestyles and opinions are becoming increasingly normative for the whole society. It is in fact a porous class, open to people who earn the right credentials. The values and mannerisms are difficult to pinpoint for a group encompassing millions of persons. Naturally, any large group of people will feature social diversity to some extent. However, some generalizations can be made using education and income as class-defining criteria. William Thompson and Joseph Hickey noted that upper-middle-class individuals have a more direct and confident manner of speech. In her 1989 publication Effects of Social Class and Interactive Setting on Maternal Speech, Erica Hofginsberg found that among her surveyed subjects, upper-middle-class mothers talked more per unit of time and sustained longer interactions with children. She also found that the speech of upper-middle-class mothers differs in its functional, discourse, and lexicosyntactic properties. For those in the working class, upper-middle-class manners tend to require individuals to engage in conversational discourse with rather distant associates and to abstain from sharing excessive personal information. This contradicts working-class speech patterns, which often include frequent mentions of one's personal life. Further research also suggests that working-class parents emphasize conformity, traditional gender roles, and the adherence to external standards in the children, such as being neat and clean and in strict leadership. This contrasted with professional class households, where gender roles were more egalitarian and loosely defined. Upper-middle-class children were largely taught to adhere to internal standards, with curiosity, individuality, self-direction, and openness to new ideas being emphasized. While a recent Gallup survey showed mass affluent households to be conservative on economic issues while liberal on social issues, the upper middle class seems to be relatively politically polarized. In the 2006 midterm elections, both Democrats and Republicans received over 40% of the vote from those with advanced degrees and those in households with six-figure incomes, while households with incomes exceeding $100,000 tend to favor Republicans slightly. They are also the only income demographic where Ralph Nader won more than 1% of the vote. Among those with graduate degrees, a smaller group than those with six-figure incomes, the majority tends to vote Democratic, with roughly 1% having voted for Nader in 2004. Lower middle class. The lower middle class is the second most populous according to both Gilbert's as well as Thompson and Hickey's models, constituting roughly one-third of the population, the same percentage as the working class. However, according to James M. Henslan, who also divides the middle class into two subgroups, the lower middle class is the most populous, constituting 34% of the population. In all three class models, the lower middle class is said to consist of semi-professionals and low-level white-collar employees, an adaptation by sociologists Brian K. William, Stacy C. Sawyer, and Carl M. Wallstrom of Dennis Gilbert's class model gave the following description of the lower middle class. The lower middle class. These are people in technical and lower-level management positions who work for those in the upper middle class as lower managers, craftspeople, and the like. They enjoy a reasonably comfortable standard of living, although it is constantly threatened by taxes and inflation. Generally, they have a bachelor's and sometimes master's college degree. Taking into account the percentages provided in the six-class model by Gilbert as well as the model of Thompson and Hickey, one can apply U.S. Census Bureau statistics regarding income. According to these class models, the lower middle class is located roughly between the 52nd and 84th percentile of society. In terms of personal income distribution in 2005, that would mean gross annual personal incomes from about $32,500 to $60,000, as 42% of all households, and the majority of those in the top 40%, had two income earners. Household income figures would be significantly higher, ranging from roughly $50,000 to $100,000 in 2005. In terms of educational attainment, 27% of persons had a bachelor's degree or higher. Working class majority. Seen from a sociological perspective based on class cleavages, the majority of Americans can be described as members of the working class. The use of the term working class is applicable if the position of individuals, households and families in relation to the production of goods and services is the main determinant of social class. Class distinctions are seen in the distribution of individuals within society whose influence and importance differ. The nature of a person's work and the associated degrees of influence, responsibility, and complexity determine a person's social class. The higher the degree of influence and responsibility a person has, the more complex the work, the higher his or her status in society. As qualified personnel become scarce for relatively important, responsible, and complex occupations, income increases, following the economic theory of scarcity resulting in value. According to this approach, occupation becomes more essential in determining class than income, whereas professionals tend to create, conceptualize, consult and instruct. Most Americans do not enjoy a high degree of independence in the work, as they merely follow set instructions. Definitions of the working class are confusing. Defined in terms of income, they may be split into middle or statistical middle class in order to speak to issues of class structure. Class models such as Dennis Gilbert, Thompson and Hickey estimate that roughly 53% of Americans are members of the working or lower classes. Factors such as nature of work and lack of influence within the jobs leads some theorists to the conclusion that most Americans are working class. They have data that shows the majority of workers are not paid to share their ideas. These workers are closely supervised and do not enjoy independence in the jobs. Also, they are not paid to think. For example, the median annual earnings of salaried dentists were $136,960 in May 2006, indicating a high degree of scarcity for qualified personnel. The opinions and thoughts of dentists, much like those of other professionals, are sought after by their organizations and clients. The dentist creates a diagnosis, consults the patient, and conceptualizes a treatment. In 2009, dental assistants made roughly $14.40 an hour, about $32,000 annually. Unlike dentists, dental assistants do not have much influence over the treatment of patients. They carry out routine procedures and follow the dentist's instructions. Here we see the dental assistant being classified as working class. Similar relationships can be observed in other occupations. Weberian definition. Some modern theories of political economy consider a large middle class to be a beneficial, stabilizing influence on society, because it has neither the possibly explosive revolutionary tendencies of the lower class, nor the absolutist tendencies of an entrenched upper class. Most sociological definitions of middle class follow Max Weber. Here the middle class is defined as consisting of professionals or business owners who share a culture of domesticity and suburbanity and a level of relative security against social crisis, in the form of socially desired skill or wealth. Thus the theory on the middle class by Max Weber can be cited as one that supports the notion of the middle class being composed of a quasi-elite of professionals and managers, who are largely immune to economic downturns and trends such as outsourcing which affect the statistical middle class. Income. Many social scientists, including economist Michael Zweig and sociologist Dennis Gilbert, contend that middle-class persons usually have above-median incomes. As social classes lack clear boundaries and overlap, there are no definite income thresholds as for what is considered middle class. In 2004, sociologist Leonard Beathley identifies a male making $57,000 and a female making $40,000 with a combined household's income of $97,000 as a typical middle-class family. In 2005, sociologists William Thompson and Joseph Hickey estimate an income range of roughly $35,000 to $75,000 for the lower middle class and $100,000 or more for the upper middle class. Education and income. Educational attainment is one of the most prominent determinants of class status, as educational attainment represents expertise, which is a necessary component of the capitalist market system. Its ownership may be seen as the ownership of one of the factors of production. In other words, those with advanced degrees already own one of the essential buttresses of the economy: expertise. Additionally, educational attainment is basis for occupational selection. Those with higher educational attainment tend to be positioned in occupations with greater autonomy, influence over the organizational process, and better financial compensation. While economic compensation is merely the result of scarcity, educational attainment may be related to that very economic principle as well. The attainment of a graduate degree represents the acquisition of expertise that in itself may be scarce, thus leading to better financial compensation for the owner. As stated above, the upper middle class features a strong reliance on educational attainment for much of its social and economic well-being. The following chart further explains the strong correlation between educational attainment and personal as well as household income. Source: household income controversy. Income is one of a household's attributes most commonly used to determine its class status. Yet income may not always accurately reflect a household's position within society or the economy. Unlike personal income, household income does not reflect occupational achievement as much as it measures the number of income earners. Sociologist Dennis Gilbert acknowledges that a working-class household with two income earners may out-earn a single-income upper-middle-class household, as the number of income earners has evolved into one of the most important important variables in determining household income. For example, according to the U.S. Department of Labor, 2 registered nurses could quite easily command a household income of $126,000 in 2006, while the median income for a lawyer was $94,930. Furthermore, household income fails to recognize household size. For example, a single attorney, earning $95,000, may have a higher standard of living than a family of 4 with an income of $120,000. Yet household income is still a commonly used class indicator, as household members share the same economic fate and class position. The parades suggest that relationship between the distribution of income and the class structure is blurred in the middle. We saw dual-income working-class marches looking down on single-income upper-middle-class march. In sum, the class structures as we have defined it does not exactly match the distribution of household income. Influence. The influence of the middle class depends on which theory one utilizes. If the middle class is defined as a modern bourgeoisie, the middle class has great influence. If middle class is used in a manner that includes all persons who are at neither extreme of the social strata, it might still be influential. As such definition may include the professional middle class, which is then commonly referred to as the upper middle class. Despite the fact that the professional middle class is a privileged minority, it is perhaps the most influential class in the United States. Most ideas that find their way into the cultural mainstream are crafted by a relative elite, people who are well-educated, reasonably well-paid, and who overlap, socially and through family ties, with at least the middling levels of the business community. In short, the professional middle class. Several reasons can be cited as to why the professional middle class is so influential. One is that journalists, commentators, writers, professors, economists, and political scientists, who are essential in shaping public opinion, are almost exclusively members of the professional middle class. Considering the overwhelming presence of professional middle-class persons in post-secondary education, another essential instrument in regards to shaping public opinion, it should come as no surprise that the lifestyle exclusive to this quasi-elite has become indicative of the American mainstream itself. In addition to setting trends, the professional middle class also holds occupations which include managerial duties, meaning that middle-class professionals spend much of their work life directing others and conceptualizing the workday for the average worker. Yet another reason is the economic clout generated by this class. In 2005, according to U.S. Census statistics, the top third of society, excluding the top 5%, controlled the largest share of income in the United States. Although some in the statistical middle class may have lifestyles as comfortable as those found among the ranks of the professional middle class, only few have the same degree of autonomy and influence over society as those in the professional middle class. Other white-collar members of the statistical middle class may not only be unable to afford the middle-class lifestyle but also lack the influence found in the professional middle class. Typical occupations. Note that according to the many different ways of subdividing the middle class, some of the occupations indicative of the professional middle class might be categorized as upper middle or lower middle, is mentioned above. Typical occupations for members of the middle class are those identified as being part of the professions, and often include managerial duties as well, with all being white-collar. There is great diversity among the occupations found among those living the middle-class lifestyle. and the appropriateness of some occupations being placed here will depend on each individual's personal outlook. The following is a list of occupations one might expect to find among this class: accountants, tenured professors, physicians, engineers, lawyers, architects, journalists, mid-level corporate managers, writers, economists, political scientists, urban planners, financial managers, high school teachers, registered nurses, pharmacists and analysts, etc. Autonomy is often seen as one of the greatest measurements of a person's class status, even though some working-class employees might also enjoy largely self-directed work, large degrees of autonomy in the workplace, as well as influence over the organizational process, which are commonly the results of obtained expertise. These can still be seen as hallmarks of upper middle class or professional middle class professions. As for the lower middle class, other less prestigious occupations, many sales positions, entry-level management, secretaries, etc., would be included. In addition to professionals whose work is largely self-directed and includes managerial duties, many other less privileged members of the statistical middle class would find themselves in semi-independent to independent white-collar positions. Many of those in the statistical middle class might work in what are called the professional support fields. These fields include occupations such as dental hygienists and other professional and sales support. Consumption. The American middle class, at least those living the lifestyle, has become known around the world for conspicuous consumption. To this day, the professional middle class in the United States holds the world record for having the largest homes, most appliances, and most automobiles. In 2005, the average new home had a square footage of 2,434 square feet, with 58% of these homes having ceilings with heights in excess of 9 feet on the first floor. As new homes only represent a small portion of the housing stock in the U.S., with most suburban homes having been built in the 1970s when the average square footage was 1,600. It is fair to assume that these large new suburban homes will be inhabited by members of the professional middle class. Overall, many social critics and intellectuals, most of whom are members of the professional middle class themselves, have commented on the extravagant consumption habits of the professional middle class. It is also often pointed out that the suburban lifestyle of the American professional middle class is a major reason for its record consumption. The increasing materialism, even among such a highly educated class, is also often claimed to be connected to the notion of rugged individualism, which gained popularity among the ranks of the professional middle class in the 1970s and 1980s. Academic models.